A homeless girl begs Big Shaq for help. But when he looks closer, he sees something he was never meant to notice. A black SUV idling nearby. A note clutched in her trembling hands. A name that shouldn't exist. The deeper he digs, the darker the truth becomes. Some people will do anything to keep their secrets buried. And now, they're watching him. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The afternoon sun blazed over the city, its golden light stretching shadows across the sidewalks. Shaquille O'Neal, or Big Shaq, as the world knew him, moved through the streets with the effortless grace of a giant who had long learned to make himself smaller. Today, he wasn't a celebrity, a businessman, or a sports icon. Just a man enjoying the rare solitude of an unplanned walk. The streets were alive with movement, tourists clicking pictures, cars honking in frustration, vendors shouting out their daily specials. It was ordinary, familiar. But something shifted when he approached a small diner on the corner of 8th Street. A presence. A feeling. Near the entrance, a homeless girl sat on the curb, wrapped in a tattered hoodie far too big for her frame. She couldn't have been more than 15 or 16. Her blonde hair was tangled, her face smudged with dirt, but her eyes, those eyes, were too sharp, too aware. They darted from left to right, scanning the streets like she was expecting something, or someone. Shaq slowed down, digging into his pocket. He wasn't the type to walk past someone in need. He had been raised better. "Here," he said, holding out a crisp bill. The girl looked up, hesitant. Her hands didn't move for the money. Then, in a flash, she lunged forward, grabbing his wrist with surprising strength. "They're watching me." Shaq froze. The words weren't spoken like a plea. They weren't the ramblings of someone high or delusional. They were a warning, a desperate, terrified warning. His gaze instinctively flickered to the street. Parked just across from the diner, tucked between two ordinary cars, was a black SUV with tinted windows. Nothing unusual, except for the fact that the engine was still running. The girl let go of his wrist just as fast as she had grabbed it. She shrank back, lowering her head, as if regretting speaking at all. Shaq didn't move. That SUV hadn't been there a minute ago, and now it was just sitting there, idling, waiting. Something about this felt wrong. Shaq wasn't a paranoid man, but he had learned to recognize tension when it entered a space. It was the same feeling he got before a big game, in those charged seconds when the entire arena seemed to hold its breath. He had learned to trust that instinct. He crouched slightly, bringing himself down to the girl's level. "You all right?" His voice was low, calm, the kind of voice that told people they were safe. She shook her head. Not a number. Not a yes. Just fear. Shaq followed her gaze. The SUV was still there, the driver invisible behind the dark windows. No movement, just presence. "Someone after you?" he asked. This time her breath hitched. A slow, careful nod. Shaq exhaled, considering his options. He could walk away, pretend this wasn't his problem. That's what the world did, right? Look the other way. But Shaq wasn't built that way. "Come on," he said, standing to his full height and nodding toward the diner door. "You need to eat." The girl hesitated, eyes flickering between Shaq and the SUV. For a moment, she looked like she was going to bolt. Then, cautiously, she stood up and followed him inside. The diner was a relic from another time. Red booths, checkered floors, the scent of bacon and coffee clinging to the air. It was half empty, just a few customers scattered around. Shaq guided the girl to a booth in the far corner, where the window gave him a clear view of the SUV. It was still there. She sat stiffly, like a rabbit ready to flee. Shaq slid into the seat across from her, casually flipping the menu open. "What do you want?" She blinked, surprised. "Food," he clarified. "Pick something." For the first time, she looked uncertain instead of afraid. Hesitant fingers brushed over the menu, stopping at the grilled cheese. Shaq signaled to the waitress. "2 grilled cheeses, fries, extra pickles, and a milkshake. Vanilla, right?" The girl flinched at how easily he had read her. He wasn't sure why he'd said vanilla. It just seemed right. The waitress left, and an uneasy silence settled between them. Then, in a voice so soft it barely existed, the girl whispered, "I shouldn't be here." Shaq leaned forward slightly. "Why not?" She swallowed, eyes darting to the window. The SUV was still parked, still watching. "I ran away," she admitted, voice trembling. "But not from home. From them." Shaq's stomach clenched. "Who's them?" She shook her head, biting her lip so hard it turned white. Shaq sighed. He wasn't going to push. Not yet. "All right," he said, keeping his tone light. "Let's start easy. What's your name?" A beat. Then her answer. "Lena." He knew without a doubt that was a lie. Their food arrived, breaking the tension for a brief moment. The girl, Lena, if that was even her real name, ate carefully, methodically. She wasn't starving, but she was controlled, as if she'd trained herself not to eat too fast. Shaq watched, noticing the details. Her nails, short, clean, too evenly clipped for someone living on the streets. Her hoodie, worn, but expensive once. Her shoes, dirty but sturdy. Not the kind given away at shelters. She wasn't just homeless. She was hiding. Shaq didn't press her. Instead, he kept the conversation simple. Small questions, little observations. Slowly, she started to relax. But then, her entire body tensed. The diner door had opened, and a man in a dark suit had stepped inside. Shaq didn't react immediately, but he took in every detail. The man was tall, sharp-featured, moving with the deliberate precision of someone who didn't waste steps. His eyes scanned the room, looking for someone. Lena shrank back into the booth, knuckles white around her fork. The man's gaze passed over them, then stopped. His lips curled slightly. Not quite a smile. Something colder. Shaq kept his expression neutral. The man tilted his head ever so slightly, then turned and walked back out. A few seconds later, a waitress approached their table, confused. "Hey, someone left this for you." She placed a business card on the table. It was plain white. No name, no number. Just an address. And a time. Midnight. Shaq felt Lena shiver. "Please," she whispered. "Don't go." Shaq exhaled, glancing at the window. The SUV was gone. But something told him this was just the beginning. The diner hummed with the quiet murmur of customers, the clinking of plates, and the distant sizzle of food being prepared on the grill. Shaq leaned back in his booth, his mind still on the black SUV that had vanished from the street. But just because it was gone didn't mean whoever was inside had given up. Across from him, the girl, Lena as she claimed, sat stiffly, barely touching her grilled cheese. Her shoulders were hunched, her fingers twitching slightly, her eyes darting toward the windows every few seconds. She was waiting for something. Or someone. Shaq wasn't new to spotting distress. He had seen it in young players trying to prove themselves, in teammates struggling under the weight of expectations. But this was something different. This wasn't pressure. This was fear. "You should eat," Shaq said, keeping his voice calm, steady. "Food's good here." Lena didn't respond immediately. Then, as if forcing herself, she picked up the spoon to stir her milkshake. And that's when Shaq noticed it. Her fingernails. They were dirty, yes. Her hands were smudged with the grime of the streets. But her nails, they were clipped perfectly evenly. Short, precise, almost surgical. Shaq had seen enough real homeless kids to know the little details. They chewed their nails down to uneven stubs. They had jagged edges from breaking them off. They didn't have neatly trimmed nails. Lena wasn't just homeless. She had been cared for, recently. And that meant something wasn't adding up. Shaq's gaze shifted from her hands to the clenched fist resting on her lap. Her knuckles were white, and in her grip, just barely visible between her fingers, was a crumpled piece of paper. She was hiding something. "Lena," Shaq said carefully, nodding toward her hand. "What's that?" Immediately, she jerked her hand away, stuffing the note into the pocket of her hoodie. "It's nothing." Shaq didn't press, but now his curiosity was locked onto it. The way she had hidden it. Not like it was unimportant, but like it was dangerous. Lena took a slow breath and forced herself to take a bite of her sandwich. Shaq let the silence settle between them, studying her. the way her eyes flickered to the door, the way her leg bounced slightly under the table. She was debating something. Stay or run. Trust or lie. And then, a shift in the air. A shadow passed over the window. Lena stiffened, her entire body locked up, her breath freezing mid-inhale. Shaq followed her gaze, his muscles tensing as he saw the door to the diner ease open. A man in a dark suit stepped inside. He wasn't remarkable. Late 40s, neatly groomed, the kind of face that blended in too easily. Not flashy, not aggressive, just there. And that was what made him dangerous. He didn't look like someone. He looked like no one. Lena's milkshake trembled slightly in her grip. The man took a slow look around the diner, scanning the faces, pausing for half a second too long when his eyes landed on them. Shaq kept his expression neutral. Didn't flinch, didn't react. The man's lips curved, not a full smile, just a hint, like he was amused, like he knew something they didn't. Then, without a word, he turned and walked back out. A moment later, a waitress appeared at their table, frowning. That guy just left this for you." She set a small white business card on the table. Shaq picked it up. It was blank except for an address and a time, midnight. Lena snatched the card from his hand and crumpled it, shoving it deep into her hoodie. Her breathing had gone shallow, her fingers trembling slightly as she clenched them into fists. "Hey," Shaq said, voice low. "Breathe." She didn't, not for a long moment. Then, with visible effort, she took a slow inhale. Shaq kept his voice calm, level. "Who was that?" She shook her head. "You don't want to know." "Lena." "You don't," she cut in, eyes burning now. "You think you do, but you don't." Shaq studied her. Her jaw was tight, her body ready to spring. She looked ready to bolt. "All right," he said after a pause. "Then let's do this differently. Tell me what you do want me to know." She hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "That man, he's not here to talk." Shaq exhaled. He had been around enough bad deals, bad contracts, and bad people to recognize an underlying message when he heard one. "You think they'll come back?" Lena let out a hollow laugh. "They never left." Shaq glanced toward the window, the street outside now looking too quiet. The SUV was gone. But that didn't mean they were safe. Shaq drummed his fingers against the table, thinking. He could walk away now. Let this be someone else's problem. He had worked his whole life to build his name, his business, his stability. And yet, that wasn't who he was. He looked at Lena. She was scared. She was alone. And she was running from something bigger than she could handle. "You got somewhere safe to go?" he asked. Lena looked down. "Nowhere they won't find me." Shaq nodded slowly. Then he slid out of the booth, tossing a few bills on the table. "All right," he said. "Then you're coming with me." Lena's head snapped up. "What?" "You don't trust me yet. That's fine. But I'm not leaving you here. So, let's go. We'll figure this out somewhere safer than a diner with big windows." Lena hesitated. Then, after a long, shaky breath, she stood. Shaq led the way out, scanning the street, making sure no one was waiting. The city hummed around them, normal, indifferent. But Shaq knew better. Something had shifted. And this was far from over. The air inside the diner had changed. It was the same clatter of plates, the same hum of conversations, the same warm scent of coffee and grilled cheese. But something felt off now, like a pressure shift before a storm. Lena felt it before she saw him. Her fingers went rigid around her milkshake glass. Her breath hitched. Not the kind of flinch that came from surprise, but from recognition. Shaq noticed the moment her body language changed. He followed her gaze toward the door, just as a man in a dark suit stepped inside. The man wasn't big, wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. He moved with the kind of quiet confidence that came from knowing no one would ever ask him why he was there. He wasn't trying to blend in. He just didn't need to stand out. Shaq had seen men like this before. Agents, handlers, executives, people who made moves behind the scenes, People who never wanted their names remembered. Lena sat frozen, her fingers tightening around her hoodie sleeves. The man's gaze swept the diner like a scanner, deliberate, slow. When his eyes landed on them, he didn't blink. He smirked. Not friendly, not amused, just a flicker of control. Then, as casually as he had walked in, he turned and walked out. But not before slipping something onto Shaq's table. A small white business card. Blank except for an address. And a time. Midnight. Lena snatched the card before Shaq could reach for it. Her reaction was immediate. Panic, not fear. Pure, raw panic. No, she breathed, shaking her head. No, no, no. We're not doing this. Shaq watched as she crushed the card in her fist like it physically burned. You know what this is? He asked. She swallowed hard. It's an invitation, she said, voice hollow. It means you have a choice. Walk into it, or walk away. Shaq took in her words carefully. The way she said it, the weight behind it. You're saying if I show up, you won't come back, Lena said flatly. That's how people disappear. Shaq sat back, exhaling. The weight of her words settled over him like thick fog. She wasn't guessing. She knew. Lena. His voice was calm, even. Who are these people? She clenched her jaw, shaking her head. You don't want to know, Shaq. You really don't. Shaq studied her carefully. She wasn't just scared. She was trying to protect him. He let a beat of silence pass. Then, carefully, he pried the crushed card from her grip and smoothed it out. An address. No name. Just a time. He tapped the card on the table, thinking. I need to know more, he said. Lena let out a bitter laugh, rubbing her temples. You think that guy in the suit was a warning? She leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. That wasn't a warning, Shaq. That was a leash. Shaq had spent his entire life making decisions under pressure. Championship games, business deals, life-changing moments where the wrong move could cost everything. But this wasn't a game. This wasn't about contracts or points on a scoreboard. This was about something bigger. Shaq tapped the card against the table again, glancing at Lena. You're saying if I go, I don't come back. Lena's lips parted slightly, like she wanted to argue, but then she shut her mouth. Instead, she exhaled shakily. Number, I'm saying if you go alone, you don't come back. Shaq caught the shift in her words. Alone. Lena looked out the window, scanning the street, like she expected someone else to be watching now. They don't just invite random people, she murmured. If they gave you a time, it means they already decided something about you. Shaq arched a brow. Like what? She hesitated. Like whether you're useful or whether you're a problem. Shaq sat back, considering his next move. He was supposed to be heading home right now, unwinding after a long day. Instead, he was sitting in a cheap diner with a runaway girl who knew too much, holding a business card from a man who didn't exist. Normal people wouldn't go. Normal people would walk away. But Shaq wasn't normal, and he had never been the type to walk away. You're right, he said finally, tossing a few bills on the table. We're not doing this. Lena blinked, confused. We're not? No, Shaq said, standing up. Because I'm not going alone. Lena's face shifted between fear and disbelief. Shaq. Come on, he said, motioning for her to follow. We've got work to do before midnight. She didn't move at first. Then slowly, she stood. The two of them walked out of the diner, into the unknown. And the clock ticked closer to midnight. The ride to the hotel was silent. Shaq drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly against his chin, deep in thought. Beside him, Lena sat curled into herself, staring out the window. The city lights flickered across her face, painting her in brief moments of color. Blue, red, orange, gone. Every few minutes, she glanced behind them, checking, watching, waiting. Shaq didn't ask if she expected someone to be following. He already knew the answer. He had booked the hotel under a fake name, something he hadn't done in years. No credit cards, no paper trail. Cash only. It wasn't that he had anything to hide, but tonight was different. By the time they reached the room, Lena looked exhausted, but Shaq could tell it wasn't from lack of sleep. It was the kind of exhaustion that came from always running. The second they were inside, she bolted the door, then checked it twice. Shaq didn't comment. He simply sat down in the chair by the window, stretching his legs. "All right," he said, watching her carefully. "We need to talk." Lena hesitated. Then, slowly, she sank onto the edge of the bed, hands clasped in her lap. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked small. "I need your real name," Shaq said. His voice was calm, even. "No more games. No more lies." Lena swallowed hard. She opened her mouth, then closed it. "You don't understand," she whispered. "My name doesn't exist." Shaq leaned forward slightly. "Try me." A long silence. Then, so soft he almost missed it, she spoke. "Alana Pierce." Shaq's breath caught in his throat. He knew that name, and he knew why she shouldn't exist. Shaq reached for his phone. He typed the name quickly, heartbeat picking up as the search results loaded. Nothing. Not a single record. Not a missing persons report. No news articles. No history. Shaq clenched his jaw. That's impossible. Alana's fingers twisted in her hoodie sleeves. "Told you." Shaq kept scrolling, trying variations, birth records, legal databases, anything. But the more he searched, the more obvious it became. She had been erased. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Alana shook her head. "I don't know anymore." Shaq studied her. The way she sat, shoulders curled in like she was carrying something too heavy for someone her age. But there was something else. Something deeper. "If I search harder, am I gonna find out you're..." He hesitated. "Dead?" She flinched. That was all the answer he needed. Shaq exhaled slowly, trying to piece it together. If Alana Pierce was a name that shouldn't exist, why did he know it? It took a second. Then, it hit him. Years ago, there had been a story. A missing girl. No body was ever found, but after a year of dead-end leads, the case went cold. Eventually, she was declared legally deceased. But there was something about it that didn't sit right. Shaq pulled up an old news site and scrolled through the archives. His stomach twisted when he found it. Alana Pierce, missing at 12 years old, declared dead at 14. But she was sitting right in front of him. Shaq ran a hand over his face, exhaling. "This doesn't make sense." Alana gave a hollow laugh. "Now you get it." Shaq rubbed his temple, trying to think. "Okay, let's break this down. You disappeared when you were a kid. No records, no reports, no paper trail. But someone is still watching you. Someone is still trying to keep you hidden." Alana nodded. Shaq frowned. "Why?" She hesitated. Then finally she whispered, "Because I remember something I wasn't supposed to." Shaq narrowed his eyes. "And what's that?" Alana didn't answer. Before he could push, his phone vibrated. Shaq glanced at the screen and froze. A news alert. "Shaquille O'Neal seen with unknown girl. Sources say he may be involved in..." He didn't finish reading. Someone wanted to control the story. Someone wanted him in the middle of it. Shaq tightened his grip on the phone. This wasn't just about Alana anymore. This was about whoever was pulling the strings, and they were already ahead. Alana was staring at the screen too, her face pale. "They're setting you up." Shaq exhaled sharply. "No kidding." A cold silence filled the room. Then, without looking away from his phone, Shaq said, "Alana, what do they want from you?" She hesitated. Then, "Not from me. From you." Shaq looked up. Her eyes were filled with something he hadn't seen before. Not just fear. Resignation. "They don't need me back," she said quietly. "They just need you to stop asking questions." Shaq leaned back, letting that sink in. This wasn't just about who she was. It was about who he was. And whoever they were, they had just made a mistake. They thought he would scare easy. They thought they could control the story. They were wrong. Shaq turned off his phone, tossing it onto the table. Alana watched him carefully. "What now?" Shaq stood, grabbing his coat. Now? He glanced at her. We flipped the script. Alana swallowed. You sure you want to do this? Shaq gave her a small, steady nod. I've spent my whole life winning. I don't plan on stopping now. Alana exhaled, like she had been waiting for that answer. Then finally, she stood too. Outside, the city hummed with life. But something had shifted. This wasn't about running anymore. It was about who was really in control. And Shaq was about to find out. Shaq sat on the edge of the hotel bed, his phone pressed against his ear. Outside, the city buzzed like nothing had changed. But inside this dimly lit room, everything was different now. Alana sat across from him in the chair by the window, hugging her knees to her chest, staring at the door like she expected someone to break through it any second. She hadn't spoken much since he showed her the news alert. Someone had put his name in the headlines for the wrong reasons. Someone wanted to control the story before he even had a chance to understand it. And he knew exactly who to call. The line clicked. Then, a deep, familiar voice came through. Shaq? It's been a minute, man. What's up? Jared Langston, a veteran journalist, one of the few who never sold out, never backed down, never played by the rules of the people who owned the news. Shaq hadn't spoken to him in years, not since the last time he got too close to something dangerous. You still chasing ghosts? Shaq asked. Jared chuckled. You calling to reminisce, or you got something? Shaq glanced at Alana. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, but she didn't stop him. I need you to look into a name, Shaq said. Alana Pierce. The other end of the line went dead silent. For a long moment, nothing. Then a slow, careful breath. Shaq, Jared said, voice lower now. Where are you? Shaq's grip on the phone tightened. Why does that matter? Because, Jared said, that name? That's not just a name. Shaq stood, pacing toward the window. Below, cars moved like veins of light, the city alive with people who had no idea how dark things could get. I need details, Shaq said. What do you know? Jared exhaled sharply. Alana Pierce was at the center of one of the biggest scandals that never made the news, a trafficking ring. Rich, powerful people. The kind of names that don't get printed in papers because they own the papers. Shaq glanced at Alana. Her grip on the armrest had tightened. Jared continued. There was one witness, a woman who was about to expose everything. She had the files, the names, the proof. But before she could go public, she disappeared. Just like that. Case went cold. No body, no reports. Nothing. Shaq already knew where this was going. The woman, he said slowly. Her name? Jared hesitated. Then, Naomi Pierce. Alana's breath hitched. Shaq turned to her, his stomach dropping. She was pale, frozen, shaking. That witness, she whispered, was my mother. Shaq lowered the phone slowly. Alana, he said, voice careful. Did you know? She shook her head, eyes wide, like she was piecing it together for the first time. I knew she was gone, but I thought she just left. I was a kid, Shaq. No one told me anything. She wrapped her arms around herself, pulling inward. I thought she was a bad mom. I thought she didn't want me. Shaq sat back down across from her. She didn't leave you, Alana. His voice was steady, but the weight of those words filled the room. They took her. Alana looked at him, and for the first time, there were tears in her eyes. Jared's voice came back through the phone. Shaq, he said. If the girl is still alive, if they find out she's talking to you. I know, Shaq said. They'll try to make her disappear again. A long silence. Then, Jared's tone shifted. Where are you? Shaq didn't answer. Can you dig up anything on Naomi? Where she was last seen? Who she was working with? Jared exhaled. I can try, but this was years ago. People covered their tracks. Whoever cleaned that case up was good. Not good enough, Shaq said. We just pulled the thread. Now we see who pulls back. Jared was quiet for a beat. Then, I'll call you when I have something. Shaq ended the call and set his phone on the table. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Alana whispered, She was trying to save me. And Shaq knew. This wasn't just about what happened to Naomi anymore. It was about finishing what she started. A knock at the door shattered the silence. Not loud, not rushed. Just 3 slow, deliberate taps. Alana's breath caught. She scrambled back, pressing herself against the headboard. Shaq! Shaq was already moving, not toward the door, but toward the nightstand where the hotel phone sat. He grabbed it, held it to his ear. Dial tone. The line was dead. His stomach twisted. Another knock. Shaq approached the door slowly, every instinct telling him this wasn't right. He glanced at the peephole, but stopped himself. Too easy. A trap. Instead, he stood off to the side and listened. No footsteps, no movement, just presence. Then, something slid under the door. A small white envelope. Shaq waited. 10 seconds. 20. Then, silence. Whoever had been outside was gone. Alana was shaking. Don't open it, she whispered. Shaq didn't answer. He crouched, picked it up, and peeled back the flap. Inside was a single slip of paper. 5 words. Walk away while you still can. Shaq read it twice. Then slowly, he set it on the table. Alana was staring at it like it might explode. Shaq, this is bad. This is really, really bad. I know, he said calmly. She shook her head, gripping her hair. You don't get it. They don't do warnings. If they left that note, it means they already decided what happens next. Shaq leaned forward. And what happens next? Alana swallowed. Either you stop digging, her voice dropped to a whisper, or they bury you too. Shaq exhaled. The weight of the moment settled between them. The hotel room suddenly felt too small, the walls too thin. He had a choice. Walk away, let this be someone else's problem. Or keep going. Shaq looked at Alana, a girl who wasn't supposed to exist, carrying secrets she was never supposed to know. The answer was already clear. Shaq grabbed his phone and dialed. Jared picked up instantly. You got something for me? Shaq's voice was steady. Yeah, he said. I got a name. He glanced at the note on the table one last time. Walk away while you still can. Shaq smiled. Let's make sure they regret this. The moment Shaq and Alana left the hotel, the city felt different. It wasn't the streets, the traffic, or the neon signs blinking overhead. It was the air itself. Heavy. Thick with something unseen. Every step they took, Shaq could feel eyes on them. Alana walked beside him, her hood pulled low, hands tucked into her sleeves like she was trying to disappear. Like she'd done this before. Shaq had spent years learning how to read a crowd, how to feel pressure before it arrived. Right now, every alarm in his gut was going off. Someone was watching. Someone was waiting. But they couldn't stop moving. Shaq led them 3 blocks down, cut through a parking garage, then doubled back toward a different street before stepping into a 24-hour diner. Not because they needed food, but because they needed time. Alana slid into the booth, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. Her nails were pressing into the plastic, knuckles white. You see them too, don't you? She whispered. Shaq didn't answer right away. He just scanned the street through the window. Nothing obvious. But the thing about people who don't want to be seen, they know how to blend in. We need a new plan, Shaq said. Alana hesitated, then slowly reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out the crumpled note she had been hiding since the diner. Shaq watched as she smoothed it out, like she was about to detonate something. He expected words, a warning, a message. Instead, what he saw was a bank account number and a date. 3 days from now. Shaq frowned. This is what you've been hiding? Alana nodded. Shaq tapped the numbers. Whose account is this? My mother's, Alana said quietly. Or at least, it was. Shaq didn't move for a second. She had money stashed. Alana continued. Somewhere safe. She told me before she disappeared, if anything ever happened to her, I'd find the answer in her account. She swallowed. But I never knew where it was. Until now. Shaq studied the numbers again. The name of the bank was printed faintly in the corner. It wasn't in this city. It was 3 hours away. Shaq exhaled. Then that's where we're going. Alana's eyes widened. You don't have to. Not up for debate, Shaq said. We're moving now. Alana didn't argue. Because deep down she knew it too. If they stayed in this city, they wouldn't last the night. They didn't take a car. Too easy to track. Instead, Shaq bought 2 train tickets, cash only, no names, no records. They boarded quietly, sitting near the back. The train wasn't crowded, mostly tired commuters, students with headphones, and a few restless tourists. For the first 20 minutes, nothing happened. Then, Shaq felt it. The shift, like the air had changed. Someone was watching. He turned his head slightly, his years of playing under stadium lights teaching him how to move without giving anything away. That's when he saw him. A man with a newspaper. Nothing unusual. Except for one thing. The newspaper was upside down. Shaq stayed calm. Didn't react. Alana hadn't noticed him yet, but Shaq did. The way the man wasn't really reading, just glancing over the top every few minutes. The way his posture was too stiff, too controlled. Shaq leaned toward Alana, keeping his voice low. "Don't turn around." She froze. "What?" "Not yet. Just listen." Alana swallowed, nodding. "There's a man, 3 rows up, gray suit, newspaper." Alana inhaled sharply. "How do you know he's watching us?" Shaq smirked slightly. "Newspaper's upside down." She clenched her fists. "I told you they don't stop." Shaq nodded, thinking. They needed to get off this train. Fast. "We get off at the next stop," Shaq said. Alana frowned. "But that's not our—" "Trust me." She hesitated, then nodded. Shaq pulled out his phone and pretended to take a call. Yeah, we'll be there in 5 minutes," he said loudly, as if confirming plans. "See you soon." Then, as the train slowed, he stood, stretching casually. Alana followed. The moment the doors opened, they stepped off, then bolted, not toward the exit, toward the opposite platform. Shaq's eyes flickered back to the train just before the doors closed. The man, still sitting there, still holding the newspaper, still watching. Alana was breathing fast. "Shaq, he's gonna know—" "Not yet," Shaq said, guiding her toward a taxi parked outside the station. He opened the door, letting her in first. The driver glanced at them in the mirror. "Where to?" Shaq thought fast. "Take the long way downtown." As the car pulled into traffic, Shaq kept his eyes on the station entrance. 2 minutes. 3. Then, the man in the suit emerged, but he wasn't running. He wasn't even looking around. He just pulled out his phone, dialed, and smirked. Shaq's stomach dropped. He wasn't following them, because he already knew where they were going. Alana saw it too. "Shaq." Shaq exhaled slowly. "They're not just tracking you." He turned his phone over in his hand. Alana's face went pale. "They're tracking you." Shaq nodded. "Looks like it." A long silence filled the taxi. Alana swallowed hard. "Then what do we do now?" Shaq leaned back, thinking. Then, quietly, he said, "We stop playing their game." Because if they knew where he was going, that meant it was time to change the rules. The taxi rolled to a stop in front of the bank. From the outside, it looked ordinary. A small, gray-bricked building wedged between a coffee shop and an electronics store. Nothing flashy. No security guards out front. Just a faded sign above the door that read, "Horizon Trust and Savings." But Shaq knew better. He stepped out first, scanning the street. No black SUVs. No suited men. But that didn't mean they weren't being watched. Alana slid out next, her hood pulled low, hands shoved into her sleeves. Her body was stiff, uneasy. She was staring at the bank's entrance like it was something out of a nightmare. "You sure about this?" Shaq asked. She swallowed hard. "Number. But we don't have another choice." Shaq nodded. Then they walked in. Inside, the bank was almost too quiet. A single teller sat behind a glass window, tapping lazily at a keyboard. A security guard leaned against the wall, half watching a news broadcast on a mounted TV. The place wasn't busy, but it wasn't abandoned either. Just there. Like it existed, but barely. Shaq led Alana to the counter. The teller, a middle-aged man with thin glasses, didn't look up right away. Shaq cleared his throat. We need to access an account. The teller glanced at them. His eyes skimmed over Shaq, recognition flickering just for a second, then landed on Alana, and froze. His expression drained of all color. He swallowed, glancing toward the security guard. You're not supposed to be here. Alana's fingers dug into the... Too quiet, too easy. Alana was shaking beside him. Her hands clutched her hoodie, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She wasn't just scared, she was unraveling. Shaq turned to her. Alana, breathe. She sucked in a breath but didn't meet his eyes. She was somewhere else now, somewhere far deeper in her past. And then, in the smallest, most fragile voice, she whispered, I remember now. Shaq didn't speak, didn't push. He just let the words settle. Alana squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her palms against her temples. My mom, she whispered. She knew something. She wasn't just running. She was trying to stop it. Shaq stayed still. Stop what? Alana inhaled sharply. Then she looked at him. And in her eyes, Shaq saw something break open. A trafficking ring, she said. Government-backed, protected by people too powerful to touch. And my mom had proof. The weight of her words filled the alley, heavy, suffocating. Shaq's mind worked fast. Government-backed. That meant it wasn't just criminals. It was officials, lawmakers, people with real control. And Naomi Pierce, Alana's mother, had been trying to expose them. She was going to go public, Alana continued. She had files, names, dates. She told me she was close. But then, she broke off. Shaq didn't need her to finish. She vanished, he said quietly. Alana nodded. And I was erased with her. Shaq pulled the Polaroid from his pocket. The image had burned itself into his mind already, but now it had a name. The man shaking hands with the senator. Who is he? Shaq asked. Alana swallowed. I don't know his name, but I've seen him before. She hesitated. My mom told me about him. Said he was one of the biggest donors in the country. Charities, hospitals, political campaigns. Shaq's stomach tightened. What kind of charities? Alana's hands trembled. One's for missing children, she whispered. The words hit like a hammer. A man funding rescue efforts while running the very system that made them disappear. Shaq exhaled. We need to find him. Alana stared at the photo, her fingers tightening around her sleeves. If we do, she said, voice barely above a whisper, we're not getting out of this. Shaq didn't flinch. We're already in it, kid. Then, his phone buzzed. Shaq pulled out his phone, screen glowing in the dark alley. A text. Unknown number. You were warned. The back of Shaq's neck prickled. They weren't just tracking them. They were ahead. Alana saw the message and paled. Shaq, we have to leave, now. But before he could respond, his phone buzzed again. Another message. But this one was different. Jared Langston, Shaq's journalist friend, the only person who was helping them dig. I found something. Meet me. Alone. Shaq exhaled slowly, mind racing. 2 texts, one a threat, one a possible lead, and something told him they were connected. He looked at Alana. We need to move, but first we're making a stop. She frowned. Where? Shaq slipped the Polaroid back into his pocket. To see an old friend. Shaq parked the car in an empty lot, the glow of a flickering street lamp barely illuminating the cracked pavement. The city hummed in the distance, but here, on the outskirts, it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Alana sat in the passenger seat, her hoodie pulled tight, eyes darting toward every shadow. She hadn't spoken much since they left the alley, maybe because she knew this was the point of no return. Shaq checked his phone again, Jared's last text. Come alone. Stay here, he told Alana. She clenched her fists. What if it's a setup? Shaq gave her a small, steady nod. Then I'll handle it. He pushed open the door and stepped into the night. Jared was waiting inside a rundown diner, a cup of black coffee untouched in front of him. He looked up when Shaq walked in, his usual cocky smirk missing. You came, Jared said. You said you had something, Shaq replied, sliding into the booth across from him. Jared nodded. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. He set it on the table, tapping his fingers against it like the weight of it was heavy. Shaq didn't move. Jared exhaled. This isn't just bad, man. This is the kind of thing that gets people erased. Shaq flipped the folder open. Inside were bank records, large transactions, money being funneled through charities and nonprofits, fake death certificates, and at the very bottom, a list of names. Shaq's stomach tightened. Some of these names were senators, judges, billionaires, people who controlled industries. And one of them? The man from the Polaroid. Shaq clenched his jaw. Why hasn't this come out yet? Jared let out a dry laugh. Because anyone who tries ends up 6 feet under or missing on vacation. The second I started digging, people I know started getting warnings. He tapped the folder. This is proof. But proof means nothing if no one will run it. Shaq sat back. He knew how power worked, how money made people. Fabric of her hoodie. I need to see the account, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The teller's eyes flickered between them, hesitation clear on his face. Then, without another word, he turned to his computer and started typing. Shaq watched as the teller's fingers moved over the keyboard, fast but nervous. Every few seconds, his brows furrowed deeper. Finally, he exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his mouth, like he had just seen something that wasn't supposed to exist. He turned the screen toward them. Nothing. No balance, no transaction history, no record of the account at all. Alana's breath caught. That's not possible. The teller leaned in slightly, his voice low. This account doesn't exist. Shaq frowned. But you just pulled it up. I pulled up an empty file, the teller corrected. There should be something here. Even if the money's gone, there should be a record. A last withdrawal. A name. Something. Shaq's stomach twisted. Someone had wiped the account clean. The teller hesitated. Then, after glancing at the security guard again, he grabbed a small keycard from under the desk. I don't know what's going on, he muttered. But if you're looking for something tied to this account, there's one more place to check. Shaq tensed. Where? The teller nodded toward the far side of the bank, where a hallway led to the vaults. Room 207, he said. Alana blinked. But there's no... Exactly. The teller pushed the keycard toward them. There is no room 207, but the door is there. Shaq took the keycard and nodded. Time to find out what someone wanted buried. The hallway was dim, silent. A single row of numbered vaults lined the walls, each secured with biometric locks. And at the very end, a door with no number. Shaq swiped the keycard. A small light turned green. Then, a soft click. The door swung open. Inside was a single metal drawer. No security cameras, no digital locks, just an old-school vault deposit box. Shaq pulled it open. Inside was one envelope. Alana exhaled shakily. That's it? Shaq picked it up, flipping it over. No name, no markings. He tore it open. Inside was a single Polaroid. Shaq turned it toward the light, studying the image. 2 men stood shaking hands in what looked like an office. One of them was middle-aged, with slicked back hair and an expensive suit. The other was a senator. Alana's voice was barely a whisper. I know him. Shaq looked at her. Alana swallowed hard, her fingers gripping the edges of the photo. That man, my mom, she mentioned him before she disappeared. She said if anything happened to her, he'd be the reason. Shaq's pulse kicked up. This wasn't just a shady business deal. This was politics. And the people covering their tracks weren't just criminals. They were powerful. Alana was shaking now. What does this mean? Shaq didn't get a chance to answer. Because suddenly, the bank alarm started blaring. A red siren flashed over the vault door. The sound was deafening, bouncing off the walls. Alana jumped back, eyes wide. What's happening? Shaq's jaw tightened. Someone tripped the alarm. Heavy footsteps thundered down the hall. Security. Shaq grabbed the Polaroid and stuffed it into his pocket. We need to go, now. They bolted out of the vault just as two guards rounded the corner, guns drawn. Stop, one of them barked. Shaq grabbed Alana's wrist and yanked her toward the side exit. The security guard lunged, but Shaq moved first, spinning toward a nearby filing cabinet and knocking it over. It crashed between them, blocking the path. Shaq didn't wait to see if they'd climb over. He ran. Alana kept pace, her breath coming fast. We're not going to make it. We're already out, Shaq muttered. And then, a door, an emergency exit. He pushed through it, just as the guards reached the fallen cabinet. The second they hit the alley, Shaq grabbed Alana and pulled her behind a dumpster. They didn't move. The alarm was still wailing inside, but the alley itself was silent. No one had followed them out. Not yet. Alana's breath was ragged. Shaq, what just happened? He exhaled, glancing at the Polaroid in his pocket. Someone knew we were coming. Shaq scanned the street. No black SUVs, no men in suits. But they weren't safe. The alarm? It wasn't for them. It was a message. Someone had left that Polaroid in the vault on purpose, and the second they took it, the clock started ticking. Alana was staring at him now, eyes wide. What do we do? Shaq clenched his jaw. We find out who this senator is. Alana swallowed. And then, Shaq looked back at the bank, at the flashing red lights inside. And then, we find out why they just let us go. The alley was still. The bank alarm blared behind them, red strobes flashing through the metal door. Inside, security guards scrambled, searching for intruders that were no longer there. Shaq pressed his back against the wall, breathing evenly, listening. No running footsteps, no shouting, no sirens rushing toward them, untouchable. He glanced out the window. Alana was still in the car, arms wrapped around herself. She had barely survived being buried. Now, she was about to dig up something that could shake the whole system. Shaq closed the folder. If we release this, what happens next? Jared's face darkened. Nothing good. A long silence stretched between them. Then, a quiet voice. What if we just disappear too? Shaq turned. Alana stood in the doorway, her eyes full of something fragile. Something breaking. Jared exhaled sharply. Damn it, Shaq, I said come alone. Alana ignored him. She walked toward their table, her hands shaking. My mom tried to stop them, she whispered, and they made her disappear. She looked at Shaq, voice breaking. What if they do the same to us? Shaq didn't hesitate, not even for a second. We don't run, he said firmly. We fight smart. Shaq pulled out his phone. He scrolled through the folder, found one name, not the biggest name, but big enough. And then he did something no one expected. He posted it, a single tweet. Why is funding charities linked to missing children? Asking for a friend. No files, no accusations, just a question. And within minutes, it started. People started asking questions. Then reporters started sniffing around. One news outlet picked it up. Then another. The right people got nervous. More survivors came forward. More names got leaked, and within 24 hours, the floodgates burst open. Shaq was in a motel room when the news broke. A billionaire donor, the man from the Polaroid, was trying to flee the country. Authorities stopped him at the airport. Cameras flashed as he was escorted away, face pale, lawyers scrambling. More names followed. Alana sat on the bed, watching it unfold in real time. The people who erased her were now being exposed. She swallowed hard. We actually did it. Shaq nodded. Yeah. But something in his gut told him this wasn't over. Months later, Shaq stood outside a college campus, watching as Alana Pierce walked through the gates. A new name, a new life, one that wasn't erased. She turned back one last time, smiling softly. Thank you, she whispered. Shaq nodded. As he turned to leave, his phone buzzed. A blocked number. One last message. You only scratched the surface. Shaq exhaled, looking back at the campus. Maybe, but it was a start. Some secrets were never meant to be uncovered. but now they can't be ignored. The powerful tried to erase the truth, but the world is watching. What happens next? That depends on who's willing to keep digging, because this